The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
So much to discuss today. Let's start with CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference. We, of course, all remember Sarah Palin's infamous foreign policy claim to fame. She would be really good at foreign policy as vice president to would have been President John McCain, because you can see Russia from a remote island off the coast of Alaska. We all remember that. Scott Walker, the Republican governor of Wisconsin, who has destroyed labor unions and destroyed jobs and the economy as well, says that he would be able to take on ISIS because he took on 100,000 union protesters. He's, of course, referring to that effort where he got national, if not worldwide, national name recognition by fighting unions on the right to bargain collectively. And he says that that would give him the ability to fight ISIS. Here is Scott Walker.
I want a commander-in-chief who will do everything in their power to ensure that the threat from radical Islamic terrorists do not wash up on American soil. We will have someone who leads and ultimately will send a message not only that we will protect American soil, but do not take this upon freedom-loving people anywhere else in the world. We need a leader with that kind of confidence. If I can take on 100,000 protesters, I can do the same across the world.
So this statement created a huge buzz because it's so ludicrous and absurd. He had to issue a statement. He said, quote, "Let me be perfectly clear. I'm just pointing out the closest thing I have to handling this difficult situation is the 100,000 protesters I had to deal with." So I guess what he's saying, Lewis, is he had nothing even remotely close to dealing with ISIS to handle. When you talk about union members wanting to maintain the rights to bargain collectively, that actually has nothing whatsoever to do with ISIS.
Yeah, you can have a plan. I guess he didn't have a plan, which is fine. I wouldn't expect the governor of Wisconsin to have, to have experience dealing with ISIS-like groups. So you make a joke, and it was a pretty bad joke.
It was quite bad. American labor, now the enemy of Republicans. You're just like ISIS, according to Scott Walker. Call this man a patriot, Lewis, because he sees those who want to bargain collectively as part of a union as being just like ISIS. Very patriotic of him, isn't it?
You know, Elizabeth Warren put out a great tweet right after he said this. Her tweet said, if 100,000 teachers and firefighters are Scott Walker's enemies, maybe we should take a closer look at his friends.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really good point. And the saddest part of all of this is that there are still people who will vote for Scott Walker and who think Scott Walker would make a good president in spite of this. Donald Trump speaking at CPAC. Now, it doesn't even matter what he said. We'll get to that. But just the fact that Donald Trump speaks at CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference, presumably a place where elite Republicans and the true party insiders and experts and people who know how the conservative movement should be going and in what direction they should be moving are speaking there. And Donald Trump, birther extraordinaire, is brought in to speak. And he also, like Republican Governor Scott Walker, had an idea for defeating ISIS. I'm going to play it for you. It is not much of a plan, but I guess it is Donald Trump's plan, and some Republicans actually liked it. Check it out.
On ISIS, nobody, if I decide to run and win, nobody would be tougher than Donald Trump. Nobody. I would hit them so hard and so fast that they wouldn't know what happened. I would find a general. Remember the old days of General MacArthur and General Patton and these great generals. Now, we must have somebody in there. But I laugh as I say, and it's laugh through tears, as you say, look, they're announcing when they're going to attack the other side. How often do you see that? In 2 weeks from now, we're sending soldiers over here. We're going to attack this. General MacArthur is spinning in his grave when he sees what we do. So you got to hit him hard. You got to hit him firm. And you can't play games. You got to go hard and fast and firm.
Hard, fast, and firm is how Donald Trump recommends we fight ISIS. Just get a general. Get one of these generals, Lewis. He seems to know about two generals that used to be generals, but he has no idea of any of the ones we have now. But he assumes that we have someone like Patton, for example. Get one of these generals and just say, listen, general, like Patton, go after ISIS hard, fast, and firm. I say we elect him right now and put him in charge because ISIS would be gone if Donald Trump were president.
Perhaps we should just make him a general and have him deal with it. Yeah, I can't believe that. I mean, I do believe that he's there. Republicans love him. They take him seriously. He's a joke. I don't know. The whole thing is just a joke if you have Donald Trump at your event.
You know how Donald Trump could really defeat ISIS? Buy ISIS out as a business, take it over, skim profits off the top, and make really bad business decisions. ISIS would be out of business quickly, like lots of Donald Trump's past businesses. That's really how he could take out ISIS.
Well, he could just buy them and fire everybody, and then there'd be no one left in ISIS. Also, he refers to himself in the third person, which really bothers me, and he did it at CPAC as well.
Is that a regular thing that he does? I wasn't sure if that was for effect.
I really don't know. I do not. I try to avoid his speeches at all costs, so I don't listen to many of them.
Rick Santorum, former Pennsylvania senator and perennial, oftentimes presidential candidate Rick Santorum, he was at CPAC. He made a contribution. He told a birther joke, which completely bombed. He included a few different jokes in his speech. One of them was calling President Obama weatherman in chief for apparently believing the science on climate change. And then he went on to make a birther joke. Tepid applause. Here's what he had to say.
And for the world. In fact, the president's popularity is so bad around the world today that I heard this report from a source that the Kenyan government is actually developing proof that Barack Obama was actually born in America.
Does anyone else find it absolutely ridiculous that people like Rick Santorum, Donald Trump, Scott Walker, Sarah Palin make up an important base of one of two significant political parties in the U.S.? It really does baffle me. And I know that on many issues, Democrats are just as bad as Republicans, corporatists, and a part of this kind of status quo of campaign finance with few exceptions. I get all that. But when you look at who shows up, who is invited to show up at this CPAC conference, it's like the Republicans are playing a massive joke on absolutely everyone, but it is sadly not a joke.
A lot of Republicans don't see it that way. They look at these people like Santorum, and say, that's a great man right there. We look at him and say, this man is completely incompetent and he seems brain dead, but they love it.
Rick Santorum is kind of like our middle school vice principal, Lewis, who thinks that they're super clever and funny and doesn't realize that everybody's like, what is wrong with this person?
You know, the joke here, it's not that the material was that bad. It's just that Santorum has no idea of how to deliver a joke. It's so pathetic.
So what happened at CPAC as far as the straw poll, which often tells us nothing about who is eventually going to be the Republican nominee for president? Rand Paul won. Libertarian Republican senator from Kentucky, son of Ron Paul. Rand Paul won the straw poll at CPAC for the third year in a row. 26% of the vote for Rand Paul. Scott Walker, who compared fighting union members to defeating ISIS, was in second place with 21%. Ted Cruz, third in the CPAC straw poll. He had 11.5% roughly. Right behind him, retired neurosurgeon Ben Carson, who believes Obama is like the Nazis, was in fourth place at 11.4%. And former Florida Governor Jeb Bush, little brother of George W. Bush, son of George H.W. Bush, next with 8.3%. Of all the people in this poll, Jeb Bush, I think, actually has the best shot at being the nominee. Rand Paul, Lewis, 3 years in a row, wins the CPAC straw poll. I say zero chance of being the Republican nominee.
But I like the fact that he won the straw poll because he is one of the few people who spoke here that can form a sentence. And I just think that perhaps that is a good reflection of the audience and those watching, right?
I think it is only a reflection of the makeup of the audience because the audience was full of libertarian young conservatives. Pollsters said that just over 3,000 attendees voted, and that half of that 3,000 identified as between the ages of 18 and 25. So this straw poll is drastically overrepresenting the young conservative vote, which, as we see, and this is more proof of this, Lewis, that the young conservative constituency is going more and more in the direction of being libertarian-minded, and that is attractive to them. It does not represent the moneyed establishment of the Republican Party, and I think that this is, just tells us, these demographics tell us what we already knew, which is Rand Paul has no shot whatsoever.
Yeah, well, I think from the past, from the last election, and for a long time, we knew that.
Rand Paul, by the way, a doctor who says completely non-science stuff about vaccines and other issues, belonged to a group that believed that HIV does not cause AIDS and that vaccines cause autism, and takes Wikipedia entries and pieces of Hollywood movie scripts and recites them as if they are his own originally written speeches. And a lot of conservatives love the guy.
Oh, he's got some great material to work with there. You know, he's a lot like his father in a lot of ways. A lot of people love him, but he just has no shot.
I have shocking video from yesterday in Los Angeles where LAPD officers fatally shot a man on Skid Row after what they are saying was a struggle over an officer's weapon. Police officials offered a detailed account of what they say prompted this shooting yesterday, which happened to be captured on tape by a bystander. We're going to play some of that video for you. And Commander Andrew Smith said that officers assigned to the Los Angeles Police Department's Central Division and Safer Cities Initiative, which is a group that focuses on the Skid Row part of Los Angeles, showed up around noon after receiving a 911 call about a possible robbery. And the commander said that officers approached a man, made contact with him when he began fighting and physically resisting. The officers attempted to subdue him at one point, attempted to taser him, which was reportedly ineffective. Ultimately, you will see that they fall to the ground, they being some of the officers and this man, and then you hear shots ring out. I'm going to play the video. The explanation from the police is that there was a struggle over one of the officers' weapons. It's not clear when you watch the video whether the man on the ground who was tasered and restrained by 4 to 6 police officers was reaching for the gun that may have been holstered by an officer, if the officer's gun may have somehow fallen and the man on the ground grabbed it or appeared to try to grab it, or if none of this whatsoever is true. You tell me if you can even figure out how many times this guy was shot by police fatally. Let's look at the video.
They just killed that man.
The man has been tentatively identified. The commander of the police said it's unclear if he was homeless. What do you think about this, Lewis, when you look at the video?
I watched it multiple times, and it didn't seem like this guy was reaching for a gun. I mean, there are, I don't know how many officers here. It seems to me that if they really wanted to, they could have just all got on top of this guy and he would have been completely immobilized.
That's the question I had, which is, if we have 5 police officers, let's say 5 police officers, presumably properly trained, if their training does not equip them to restrain one guy after beating on him and tasering him, should we not be questioning the training of the police? Is that not that seems to me like it would be a fair question to ask?
Yeah, I mean, what's our basis for comparison? I mean, how does the training of police officers here compare to training of police officers in, say, Germany or Iceland or other places where there are so few um, even instances of police using their weapons? I don't really know the answer to that.
Of course, LAPD investigating, district attorneys investigating, and I still question whether we can ever really rely on local district attorneys to accurately and actively investigate police when in most cases they need the police to testify to have a shot at putting anyone away. And at the same time, we have this expectation that they're going to fairly prosecute. Maybe expectation is a bit optimistic. We have the desire that they are going to effectively and fairly investigate and prosecute police when necessary, when the dynamic at its base exposes an obvious conflict of interest.
Yeah, it's a difficult situation. I mean, do we just have a special prosecutor when it comes to police cases? It's tough. I don't know. How do you implement that?
We will see what comes of this. We will see what else we hear about this shooting, and we will see if more video comes up. I know I'll get a lot of emails from people. You can also tweet to me about this story, twitter.com/dpacman.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Our program is funded directly by our audience through the membership program. Today's new member of the day is Daniel Usher, and a very special message to James Edwin Tudd Russell. We saw that you signed up for membership last week. We are trying to email you your access information, but your email is bouncing. So unfortunately, we have no way of getting a hold of you. We are not ignoring you. Please try to get in touch. We are unable to send you that email, because we are excited to send you that email so that you can get all of the great member benefits, including access to the bonus show, the commercial-free audio and video streams of the show, as well as an archive of shows dating all the way back to 2005. Go to davidpakman.com/membership to sign up today. You can also support our program if you do any shopping at all on Amazon.com. You can go to our website, davidpakman.com, and you'll see on the right side, there's an Amazon banner. Click it and bookmark it and use it whenever you shop. Amazon sends us back a little kickback for everything you buy. Bunch of people streaming Birdman, unclear if it's because of our recommendation of it or because it won a couple of Oscars, 4 to be exact. Also, several people ordering Black Collar by Daniel Sullivan, which was my last recommendation. And super interesting, someone bought an electric vehicle charging station for about $575. I'm super curious, Lewis, about what the individual is doing with this. I mean, presumably they're charging an electric vehicle. I can deduce that. Is it in their home? Are they setting this thing up in their garage at their place of work? We're seeing way more of these electric vehicle charging stations pop up around in New York City, back in Massachusetts where we started, and apparently now you can just buy one for $575.
Yeah, pretty interesting. Is it for a car? Is it for a scooter? Is it for some type of crazy lawnmower? I don't know.
I was reading that so many different car manufacturers are actually going to release electric vehicles in the next year. I think BMW is going to have one model within every series that is an electric vehicle. GM is doing a lot with electric cars. I believe Toyota and Honda are going to have a whole bunch of new electric vehicles. So I think the next 2 to 3 years are going to be super interesting to see how quickly these vehicles are adopted by people.
Yeah, agreed. I think, and we also need to utilize some of that new battery technology that we've discussed over the years. I think we need to stop producing those dirty batteries.
Big news over the weekend. The FCC has approved net neutrality. They have classified broadband as a utility. There's good and bad. There is a lot of misinformation going on around what did and didn't happen. So let's talk about it. The FCC did reclassify broadband internet as a Title II public utility. This gives the FCC more regulatory power. The rules also apply to mobile broadband or internet on smartphones, which was not the case under the failed 2010 proposal. So what this does do is ban things like paid prioritization, which is internet fast lanes that big companies can buy. It bans slowdowns of lawful content. And what does it allow? This part is really big. The FCC will allow some cities and towns to set up and expand municipal internet services, which would override state laws that block such efforts. This is a huge part, Lewis, because a lot of big ISPs have been going at the state level to try to prevent cities from installing their own broadband. And this would supersede those state bans. That's a really good thing.
This is huge. I think if this is classified as a utility, that, of course, we should have government providing that utility in a lot of areas.
Now, is this it? Is it all ginger snaps and chocolate waterfalls from here on out? Sadly, no. There is, of course, the possibility, now that the FCC has been granted more authority with regard to the internet, that the authority could be used in the future in ways that might not be a win for the little guy, the individual internet user. So some possible areas of caution are: the government uses language like ISPs will not be allowed to block legal content, which means that depending on the definition of legal content, ISPs may be able to block stuff that we would consider part of the freedom of the internet. If the government and corporate powers that be don't like certain types of encryption or torrenting, they can make those things illegal, and thus ISPs would be able to block them. And big corporations who want to enforce copyright would love it for ISPs to block those things. That is a real and legitimate concern. It is not about fear-mongering that merely government involvement in stuff is bad, but it is a very specific thing. We just have to wait and see what happens with that.
Yeah, it could be used in the way you laid out, but this is also a law or a portion of the law that could change if it's a problem. So, it's not necessarily set in stone.
Also, bandwidth is finite. The network in your neighborhood probably can't handle every customer streaming HD movies all at once on their laptops and smart TVs. So the solution obviously is, Comcast or Verizon or AT&T, they need to add more bandwidth. And who pays for that, right? The FCC has said it's not going to be Netflix or Amazon who are going to pay for bandwidth prioritization. It sounds great for the individual consumer, but someone somewhere is going to have to pay. So it may be that Comcast and Verizon pay and pass the cost along to consumers. There is no question at all that it is correct for internet service providers and broadband providers to be a public utility for legal purposes today, obviously. But we just need to be aware of how it could come back and affect the end user. This is the correct ruling. This is a huge deal. But let's just all be aware of how this could go in the future.
Yeah, it's a step in the right direction. I'm glad this happened, but we still have a lot of things to work out clearly.
We talked to you last week about this black site, an interrogation site similar to those the CIA has in other countries in Chicago, and 4 victims of incarceration at this Chicago Guantanamo Bay style detention center known as Homan Square have come forward, and they've spoken to The Guardian about essentially being treated like cattle. 4 black men, Brock Terry, Corey Wright, DeAndre Hutcherson, and David Smith. One man, Brock Terry, was caught with 5 pounds of cannabis. He claims he was shackled to a circular thing behind the bench with arms spread open, fed only 2 times in 3 days. The Chicago police are also known reportedly for turning the temperature up really high at this facility and depriving the victims of water while they are tied up. He said, quote, "I sat in that place for 3 days, man, with no talking, no calls to anybody. They call police stations. I'm not there. I'm not there." Last week, Lewis, you proposed this question to me of, hey, when they get out, why not go to the lawyer? Why not go to the press? Why not go to the police? And I said, well, if there's no record of them ever having been detained, and if they were detained at a place that officially doesn't exist, where do you go? And that seems to be exactly the issue that is coming up for these guys.
Yeah, but now that this story has blown up and gone viral, we have people coming out of the woodwork, and who knows how many more we will hear from, and perhaps we might see some type of large class action lawsuit here.
Maybe we will. The Chicago police did not respond to questions about this. Mayor Rahm Emanuel, a former Obama administration official, is currently in the middle of a big runoff for re-election. He said it was just not true, and that the police maintain a facility that is not at all like anything relating to a CIA black site, et cetera, et cetera. There's now actually a movement to shut down Homan Square going on. And, it's such a disturbing story. I am concerned because there's no verification, there's no validation, there's no sourcing that gives us what we would call legitimate confirmation. Although to believe that it is all untrue would require a pretty wide-reaching conspiracy. Mayor Rahm Emanuel just saying, not true, period, full stop.
So I guess he's going to have to stick with that now. And perhaps if there are some more revelations, he'll have to say, oh, I had no idea.
That's what it is. He's going to have to say, I was not aware of this. And that actually may be true, because sometimes certain officials are deliberately not told about something so that they can say they have not heard of it and be telling the truth.
I don't have a hard time believing that this was actually what's happening here at all. And I hope more people who were detained there start coming out. This needs to be way bigger than it is right now.
We're going to continue following it. We will see if the outrage continues. Follow us on Twitter, twitter.com/David Pakman Show. Back after this with former health insurance executive Wendell Potter.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I'm joined today by Wendell Potter, who is former VP of Corporate Communications at CIGNA, also author of the book Deadly Spin, and most recently Obamacare, What's in It for Me? What Everyone Needs to Know About the Affordable Care Act. Wendell, it's great to have you back, of course, and you recently wrote a very interesting article talking about the United Kingdom's national healthcare program that they have. It's a topic of much controversy. It's often used by those in the U.S. who are against any kind of government involvement in healthcare to point to other countries that have government healthcare programs and to talk about how poor they are, the long wait times, the very high cost, the spending per person, the high tax rates that people in those countries have as a result of these government programs. You looked specifically at the UK, and maybe not surprisingly to some of our audience, a lot of those talking points seem to not be true.
Oh, you're exactly right, David. And I even mentioned in that post that during my career in the insurance industry, I used to spend considerable time trying to mislead people about the National Health Service in the UK and the Canadian health system and other systems that were single payer or that were very heavily regulated by the government, which is every other healthcare system in the developed world.
So let's go through what we do know and kind of these objections that become part of this mantra that is against these types of programs. With regard to what we hear about accessibility of care, long wait times, etc., what's the truth about the UK NHS system?
Well, the truth is that on almost every measure of outcomes and patient satisfaction, the UK is way ahead of the United States. And what I wrote about in that piece was first-person accounts of people who are either expats from the UK and have lived in the US, or people who have dual citizenship and have used both systems. And without any hesitation, they all said that they would much rather get their care in the UK. Some people said that even though they were living in the US, they would fly back to the UK to get care for a lot of reasons. One is the cost. It's much less expensive in the UK. And second, it's far less complicated. We have I guess probably the most complicated healthcare systems on the planet.
And when we look at the outcomes, I think that this is a really interesting element, because if we put aside for a second long waits, in many cases, those are kind of anecdotal stories that we hear about long waits. So if we put that aside for a second, particularly when it appears not to be true broadly either, when we look at outcomes, we often hear touted that in the U.S., in spite of the fact that we have a kind of employer-connected and or private insurance system as the predominant one, that the outcomes are actually better here. Are there some specific statistics or conditions that you can talk to us about that illustrate why that is not true?
Well, you're right. The arguments against the National Health Service that have been put out by opponents here in the U.S. Are anecdotal. I mean, they are anecdotes, and they're done specifically to obscure the reality of the better outcomes. The Commonwealth Fund every year does an analysis of the healthcare systems around the globe and in the developed world, and they rate them as to on various measures, on outcomes, on accessibility, on cost, among other things. And last year, the UK system came out well ahead of every other system, and certainly well ahead of the UK system. They looked at 11 countries. The UK was first, and the US was 11th. Now, hopefully, the US will start to climb up because we passed the Affordable Care Act, and that survey or that work that was done by the Commonwealth Fund was based on the experience in 2013, and then the next year, 2014, last year, is when a lot of the provisions of the Affordable Care Act kicked in. But to answer your question, a lot of the outcomes in the UK are much superior to ours. One of the things that it's really important is access to primary care, which is much more readily available in the UK. And one of the reasons why they have they have better infant mortality statistics and longevity statistics.
Let's talk a little bit now, if we concede temporarily, even though, as we know, there's no reason to do this, but if we were to concede that let me frame it a different way. Let's focus just on this issue of taxes, right? So if we can say, okay, we can have a system that works well, that is either private insurance or government funded. We can have a system that works well, that is a government system where you can have either a social safety net or straight up single payer health care. But the problem is that it's very expensive to taxpayers. If we analyze that data, I looked specifically at Australia as well as at the UK. It does not actually appear that there is a significantly higher tax burden for individuals based on having that national health care program.
No, you're exactly right, because of the efficiencies that you can get in a system that is operated largely by the government, or at least financed by the government, in which you can remove a lot of the hidden costs that we have in this system, a lot of the administrative expenses that make our healthcare system the most expensive in the world. We spend, it's been estimated about 30% of what we spend on healthcare is, in many cases, wasted, or at least characterized as administrative expenses that don't have anything to do with the delivery of care. So you save that money right off the bat. And one of the things that it's difficult for advocates of reform to communicate effectively to Americans is that we pay a lot in a hidden tax for the care that we get, for the insurance that we get. We tend to think that if we get our coverage through the workplace, that's our employer taking care of that. But actually, it's our money. So what we need to do is consider all that we spend on health care, and including what we spend on premiums, and we can see that it's far and away much more than any other country spends.
I want to go back to something you wrote about in Deadly Spin, and I often reference this, but over the years since I've read this passage now a few years ago, I forget some of the details, and I think it would be very interesting to review. You wrote in the book that the U.S. at one point was actually early in the 20th century going in the direction of single payer, and if I recall correctly, because it was similar to what our enemy Germany seemed to be doing, there was a successful campaign mounted to oppose going in the direction of single payer merely because it was similar to what our enemy was doing. Am I remembering that more or less correctly?
You really are. In fact, we have been trying to reform our healthcare system for more than 100 years. It goes back to the administration of Teddy Roosevelt, who was trying to do exactly what you described. But there was a fear-mongering campaign that developed even back then to try to scare people away from the German healthcare system. Germany was one of the first developed countries, I think it was the first in Europe, to go down the path of providing healthcare more broadly for its citizens.
And when we look going forward, you know firsthand about the propaganda campaigns that have been used here in the U.S. from the for-profit insurers to put down the programs like that originated in Germany, in the UK, in Australia, etc. What might get the dialogue to change successfully in terms of having serious conversations around national health care? I mean, we know that when you fairly ask individuals, do you believe the government has some responsibility to provide at least basic care for everybody, regardless of ability to pay? That's actually very popular. But when it gets wrapped in around corporate talking points is where it seems to fall apart.
It's exactly right. Corporations that offer or sell health insurance are very, very profitable, and they have a lot of money to invest in PR campaigns to mislead people. So we've got to realize, that's why I wrote Deadly Spin, to explain to people how that works. We've got to come up with strategies that can overcome that. And I think it's possible. We just have to know, to start with, what we're up against.
All right, we've been speaking with former VP of Corporate Communications at CIGNA, Wendell Potter. One of the books, Deadly Spin. The most recent book, Obamacare, What's in It for Me, What Everyone Needs to Know About the Affordable Care Act. Thanks as always, Wendell.
Thank you, David.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
You heard this from us before, and it is happening again. Bill O'Reilly, the host of The O'Reilly Factor on Fox News, caught in yet another lie. First, it was his lies about being in a war zone in the Falklands. Next, it was his lies about seeing nuns gunned down in El Salvador. Next, it was his lies about being outside the door of someone connected to the JFK assassination right before he committed suicide. And now, 6 of Bill O'Reilly's former colleagues are saying that the Fox News host lied about his time covering the 1992 Rodney King riots in Los Angeles for Inside Edition. Quote from O'Reilly in 2006, "They were throwing bricks and stones at us. Concrete was raining down on us. The cops saved our butts that time." However, Rick Curram, who was Inside Edition's lead reporter covering the riots, told The Guardian, quote, "It didn't happen. If it did, how come none of us remember it?" 2 members of the team say that there was a man who smashed a camera with a piece of rubble. However, that man was angry because Bill O'Reilly was disrespectful to him after arriving at the smoking remains of his neighborhood in a limousine whose driver got out of the car at one point and started polishing the limousine. O'Reilly supposedly shouted at the man and asked him, "Do you know who I am?" It's so insane, Lewis. In Argentina, which was supposedly in the Falklands, but then it was Argentina actually, Bill O'Reilly's cameraman was in danger and Bill O'Reilly saved him. Actually, it turns out the cameraman was in danger because Bill O'Reilly forced him to shoot with his light on, his camera light on, which CBS executives said not to. In LA, it turns out that they weren't in the middle of all sorts of concrete raining down. There was one specific guy who was really angry because O'Reilly showed up to cover the riots in a limo. His driver was ostentatiously polishing the car in front of these people who had just lost their homes. And then Bill O'Reilly yelled at the guy and said, "Do you know who I am?" Every single one of these points to Bill O'Reilly being exactly the type of person we thought he was.
Apart from the past few recent stories we've been covering on Bill O'Reilly, anytime there was a story about Bill O'Reilly that we heard from people who knew him, worked with him, or stories like that, it was always of him being, I guess I can't swear right now, but a jerk and a really, I don't know, not pleasant person. But then all the stories he tells on the air are just of him being this hero and this outstanding guy.
Regular
really
guy
incredible.
from Levittown out in Long Island, working class guy. And O'Reilly and Fox News are, of course, defending the coverage. Quote from Bill O'Reilly on the Hugh Hewitt show last week. Quote, we were attacked by protesters where bricks were thrown at us. Fox News released a statement to Huffington Post, which read, Bill O'Reilly has already addressed several claims leveled against him. There is nothing more here than an orchestrated campaign by far-left advocates responding to the unproven accusation du jour has become an exercise in futility. Fox News maintains its staunch support of O'Reilly, who is no stranger to calculated onslaughts, so framing O'Reilly as merely the victim of a political attack.
Yeah, I'm sure. Anytime someone says, do you know who I am? Or probably more likely the case, do you know who the F I am?
Right.
It just really gets me going. I really can't stand that.
A Russian opposition leader has been shot dead, and Vladimir Putin has denied responsibility. We're talking of Boris Nemtsov, a Russian opposition leader and big-time critic of the Russian president, Vladimir Putin. He was gunned down over the weekend near the Kremlin, just a day before a planned protest against the government. He was shot 4 times in the back by a gunman in a car as he crossed a bridge that was right in front of the Kremlin before midnight on Friday. He was 55 years old, a former deputy prime minister. This has ignited fury amongst opposition figures who say that the Kremlin has created an atmosphere of intolerance for dissent, and some going even further to suspect that Vladimir Putin may have been directly or at least indirectly, but still involved in this. Vladimir Putin quickly offered his condolences. He called the murder a provocation. I spoke to to a Russian friend and a Ukrainian friend, and my Ukrainian friend had a really funny comment. He said, in Russia, if you oppose Putin, he has you killed, undressed naked at the scene, unceremoniously laid out with bullet holes for all to see. Then he takes personal oversight over the investigation to make sure that the killer is brought to justice, while state media tells everybody he was killed by a Western intelligence agency, all meant to make Vladimir Putin look bad. We don't know, of course, that that's what happened here, but given the climate in Russia, whoever did this at least had some sense that they could get away with it without it becoming a huge controversy with regard to Vladimir Putin. So whether it was a provocation meant to make Putin look bad, it doesn't seem like that's going to be effective.
I don't feel comfortable saying that that Putin was involved or that Putin even had a really strong motive here. I mean, he has a cult-like following, and it would not surprise me that it's someone who just wanted to get rid of the opposition because they love Putin so much, decided to take this upon themselves.
Well, 2 thoughts on this. First of all, Nemtsov did say on February 10th, speaking to Russia's Sobeznik news website, quote, I'm afraid Putin will kill me. I believe that he was the one who unleashed the war in Ukraine. I couldn't dislike him more. So he was worried about Putin killing him. But at the same time, thousands of people are worried about Putin killing them. And a lot of those people have not been killed by Putin. So that alone is not proof of anything. But the other question I have is, in spite of Vladimir Putin being belligerent and seemingly drunk on power, etc., he must also realize that killing someone like Nemtsov would create a martyr, which would not be good for Vladimir Putin, particularly if he knows that some would try to hold him responsible. So I think that in the absence of evidence, we're merely speculating, and I don't really have the sense that we should take any strong position on Putin's potential involvement yet.
No, and while you're right that you could create a martyr in a case like this, you're also telling everyone that, look, if you are a dissenting voice and people are listening to you and you have some sway, I could just kill you. And so you should be afraid of me. And that can work just as well.
If you have any thoughts on any of these stories, you can call our voicemail number 24 hours a day, 219-2-DAVID-P. Here is the occasional positive voicemail. Take a listen.
Yeah, good morning, David. This is Ali in New York. I got a few problems with some of the things that you were asking as a question about President Obama's religion. Why should that matter? I mean, if that's his personal beliefs, why should it matter? And think about this. Why should it matter to America? It didn't matter before 9/11.
Yeah, so this obviously not the voicemail. That was a positive voicemail praising the show. That voicemail will come clearly on a different day. There must have been some kind of mistake. But in any case, we said in that segment that actually it would be great if it didn't even matter. Who cares? Even if President, as Colin Powell said once, even if President Obama were Muslim, why would we care about that? And it would be great if we didn't even know the religions of politicians, because that would tell us that it doesn't matter. I completely agree with the caller. We did say that during the segment, Lewis.
I agree. But there is one problem, and that is that if a president says he's Christian but is really Muslim, that means he's lying. And I don't care, I'm just saying, like, it's not good to have someone in the White House who is lying. But I don't care about the religion aspect.
All right. On today's bonus show, the WHO on hearing loss and safe music levels. Some of these recommendations may surprise you. $100,000 a year for a professional selfie retoucher. And Missouri makes a huge mistake with old cars. Get the bonus show, davidpakman.com/membership. You don't want to miss these great stories and more. Hosted by Lewis, I'm the sidekick on the bonus show. Talk to you then.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.